Hello and welcome to the garden. Well, the weather's certainly changed, and this wet weather hasn't been a blessing for my garlic. Lots of the garden needed a really good soaking, but the garlic's not enjoying it. So as you can see, some of the older leaves are starting to go over now, and garlic is pretty much ready to harvest when, let's say, around about half of the leaves have turned yellow. That should be probably around the end of this month, maybe a little bit into July for these. These were sown in the autumn and they should be ready by then, but you might just be able to make out there's some rust on these, and some of the leaves are quite badly affected. These older ones are covered in rust. Now, it's not a huge problem at this time of year because the garlic is nearly ready to harvest. I've seen people pulling their garlic already, and I think in general people tend to pull it a little bit early. However, it might have been sensible for me to lift this before this wet weather arrived, because this looks a little bit sad now. So what I'm going to do here is just cut off these older leaves, those that are affected by the rust. I'll pull all of that off, and I think I will lift these as soon as this wet weather has passed. Give them a couple of days of nice dry weather and then lift them. They're a little bit soggy at the moment. It's probably not perfect to take them up right now. But if I give these a little bit of a trim, hopefully that will just slow down the progression of the rust. Now, this stuff doesn't want to go in the compost. I think I will throw these away. Now, if I take a look down the bottom here, you can see that we do have bulbs. Actually, these could be lifted, I think, towards the end of this week. It looks like the rain should pass in a day or two. Give them a couple of days of nicer weather, and then I can come through and lift these. They're not quite ready, as you can see. These leaves would have kept on going for another few weeks at least, and I don't want to lift them too early before I've got decent bulbs, but these do appear to have produced some reasonable sized bulbs here, so I think, given the amount of rust on these, it might not be a bad idea. So very often rust isn't much of a problem. If it appears later in the season, shortly before harvest, it's not going to cause any trouble really. If you happen to get a lot of rust earlier in the year, then that can reduce the vigour of the plant and that can affect the yield, and it's probably worth trying to do something about it as soon as you spot it. First, by removing affected leaves, but there are also some things you could try to spray them with. So I've never sprayed rust before. I've always just kind of lived with it. It's a fairly regular visitor to the garden, but some of the sort of fairly benign organic sprays, things like milk and bicarbonate of soda. Milk in particular has some quite useful fungicidal properties, and I've used that in the past on mildew, mildew on things like courgettes and other squash, and that has worked fairly well. It's something that you have to maybe reapply every week or two, but if you've got a big problem with mildew, a milk spray can be reasonably effective at dealing with it. So I was wondering whether I might give these a spray of something, but looking at them and looking at the bulbs, I think it's just as well if I finish off pruning the affected leaves today and then aim to harvest these after they've had a few days of dry weather. Garlic's one of the funny ones. With shallots and onions, you can really wait until the top growth has flopped over and is all gone yellow. And obviously you want to lift those as well when they're good and dry. But garlic is one of those things that can be left in the ground too long. So if you pull it up too early, when all of the foliage is still green, that's definitely too early. You're going to miss out on bulb size. You might have a bulb there, but it's got the potential to be rather bigger if all the top growth is still green. On the other hand, if you wait for all of the top growth to die off, then you've probably left them a little bit too long, and they can sort of split open, and it's one of those where harvesting at the right moment is reasonably important, and you want to get that when about half of the leaves have gone over. That's gone over naturally, not gone over because rust has been hitting them. And I think in this case, without the rust, these would still be going for some weeks yet. But anyway, it's not a huge problem. It looks like I've got some reasonable sized bulbs there, and they've developed really well in just the last couple of weeks. The last time I had a bit of a rummage around there wasn't very long ago, and there wasn't much bulb to see. And it just shows that the swelling of that bulb happens very quickly and towards the end of their life cycle. So it's really something you want to wait for if you want to get those good sized bulbs and decent cloves. Well, I've given these a bit of a haircut now, some of them rather severely. I've removed the worst of the affected leaves. There's still plenty of rust in this patch, but I think they should be fine now just for another few days, or maybe a week at most. As soon as they've had a couple of dry days, I will lift these, or at least this variety. I've got two varieties here. This one is a French red garlic from the Rhone region. The other is Rosa di Sulmona, and that's an Italian variety. I think this one is going to give me the largest bulbs. They were certainly much larger than the Italian sort when I planted them, and it looks like these have produced larger bulbs this year as well. So this one I'm definitely going to lift. The other one I'm going to have a look at because it's much less affected by the rust. There's only a touch of it on there, and it looks like they were planted at the same time, but it looks like there may be a week or two behind in terms of development. So I might just leave the Italian sort to bulb up a little bit further. I'll have a look after they've had some dry weather, and if the others are starting to get a lot of rust on, I will lift those as well. But if they are still good for another week or so, then I might leave those in. I'll return to the garlic when we come to lift them, and we'll find out what the harvest is going to be like. But that is all for this video. Thanks very much for watching, and bye for now.